At first glance, Inertial Drift looks like any other racing game from the early 2000s. It has a cool art style, only a handful of tracks, and physics that are so over the top that you might think you're playing a Ridge Racer sequel. But I'm here to tell you that looks can be deceiving, because it's only after you pick up the controller that Inertial Drift's secret is finally revealed. This debut release from Level 91 Entertainment is what you might call a dual-stick racer. It's the kind of game where you steer with one analog stick and drift with the other, giving us a wholly unique take on the genre that comes with a fun learning curve. This is one of the most original racing games I've played all year. If you don't like drifting, then, well, this game might not be for you. Inertial Drift is the type of racer where it doesn't really matter how tight the corners are, because you're always gonna be flying around them with reckless abandon, barreling sideways like a Fast and Furious movie. Everything from the tracks to the modes are all geared around drifting as much as possible. So much so that there's actually a second analog stick dedicated to just whipping the back end of that car around at any old time. You see, this is the most interesting part of Inertial Drift because it fundamentally changes the way you race around the 10 courses. If you were to play it like any other racing game, you would barely get beyond the first turn. You'll quickly discover that the steer analog stick barely registers, and trying to break around a corner will send you flying right into a wall. The trick is in the second analog stick, which gives you full control over the drifting. This acts as a way to stylishly make big turns, all of which you can finesse by using the steer stick. Now, I'm not gonna lie, this takes some getting used to. Thankfully, the game eases the player into driving sideways by having us play through a brief but exciting story mode that has us following a group of teenage racers as they prepare for the Summer Grand Prix. This allows us to not only get used to the gameplay and course designs, but also introduces the teenagers to a bunch of new friends and rivals, all of which will populate the many modes found in Inertial Drift. The story mode is pretty simple in concept. The teens want to practice, so they jump around the map, meeting new people and challenging themselves on new courses. We'll need to complete 3 race types at each of the different locations, which can be anything from a time trial to a standard one-on-one battle for first. Some of my favorite race types include a style battle where you earn points by cleanly driving around the courses, and the duels where you'll gain points by staying in front of the competition. What's even cooler is that every character has their own set of events and story beats, giving us a lot of incentive to go back through the story mode multiple times in order to see it from all sides. And the truth is, that's just the start of the different modes found in Inertial Drift. Players will want to complete the challenge mode in order to open up new vehicles, try their hand at that Grand Prix that everybody's been talking about, and even play all 10 courses forwards and backwards in the arcade mode. And before you ask, yes, Inertial Drift offers both split-screen and multiplayer online races, which is something I always love seeing in racing games. Now, getting back to the racing for a moment, I really like a lot of the decisions made by the developer. It's not enough to master the handling of one car because there are some big differences between the vehicles. The dual-stick gameplay may be easy to pick up for the first couple of cars, but the tougher rides will shake things up by forcing you to relearn how to use the drift stick. There's a surprising amount of depth to be found here, especially when you unlock the nicer cars and harder difficulties. I mean, the funky steering may take a little getting used to, but once it clicks, you'll have a hard time putting it down. The drifting is so much fun. Unfortunately, some of the fun is limited by the lack of content. Sure, this game is filled with modes and events, but there are only 10 courses, and a lot of them look the same. While I love the cel-shaded art style and the personality the developers have brought to the game, many of the levels share similar color palettes and backgrounds. With only 10 stages, I was kinda hoping there would be more variety. Another issue is that the narrow tracks tend to limit the types of events that you get to race. Most of the game involves racing against yourself or ghosts, with only the occasional one-on-one battle. It would have been fun to see larger scale races that involved 5 or 6 or even 7 cars on the track at the same time. But that's not the focus of Inertial Drift. What's clear is that Level 91 Entertainment has found a cool twist on the racing formula and has made a fun game out of it. That said, this has the feel of being a first game in a long-running franchise. They find a lot of ways of keeping you invested in the limited selection of tracks, but there's so much more that could have been done with the drift mechanic. While I definitely liked Inertial Drift, I have a hunch that it's going to be the sequel that I fall in love with. If you're one of those people who doesn't think Ridge Racer has enough drifting, then Inertial Drift is the game for you. This throwback racing game comes to life with a cool art design, hip cast, and a ton of modes. Not to mention both split screen and online multiplayer options. However, the real star is the gameplay, which uses a dual stick approach that puts you in control in a whole new way. Fans of barreling around corners sideways are not gonna find a better game this year than Inertial Drift. Hey, thanks for watching our review. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new reviews and features almost every day. Now here's the question I have for you. What is your favorite racing game? Look, it doesn't have to be arcadey like this one. Are you more into simulators, or maybe the racers with weapons? Let me see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back next week with a review of the suicide of Rachel Foster. Yeah, that's a real upbeat one. And a new episode of Game Over. But first, you'll want to tune in for the triumphant return of Defunct Games news. In the meantime, I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.